Hey everybody, thanks for joining, welcome. Do me a favor, give me a thumbs up to make sure that you can hear me okay, see me okay, and we'll get this thing going. Okay, it looks like we are good to go here. Alright, I love that people know as soon as they see me just to say we can see you, we can hear you. This is just my anxieties, as always, presenting themselves. Okay, so we are here now for the third Republican debate. This is after, after the I guess, generously put, the train wreck that was the first two. We are down to 5 candidates who are left off in this debate. So in tonight's debate, we'll be hearing from Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. We'll be hearing from Nikki Haley. We'll be hearing from Tim Scott, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Chris Christie. And I think the interesting thing to note in all of this is that none of these people are actually running to win. None of them are running a winning campaign. Or just about all of them are vying to get second place, which, you know, if you're vying for second place, that and $5 will get you a foot long at Subway. So I'm not really sure what the whole point of this exercise is. I think that time and time again, we are seeing that really ultimately these people aren't willing to do what they need to do to be able to defeat Donald Trump. And the ones who are saying what they need to say to be able to defeat Donald Trump are just getting excommunicated from the party and have no support from the other people on that stage. Like Chris Christie, for example, will say the things that he needs to say to actually try and defeat Donald Trump, but he's getting no support from anybody else in that party or on that stage, to the point where he just becomes a pariah in the Republican Party. And you would think that the other people would jump on this effort to attack Donald Trump, what with him being the only person standing between all of them and the presidency. And yet, well, you know, per usual, we get these mealy-mouthed responses from these people, these very tepid attacks. I mean, my God, Ron DeSantis and his attacks on Donald Trump are as delicate as a springtime flower. But yet we're supposed to believe that he is actually out there running for the presidency. Thank you, by the way, for those who are contributing in the chat. So Peter Hamby, had asked a question. Last time Trump won the debate without appearing, less saying a word about it. Is this a waste of time and money, or is this Trump's VP idol live? I think that's the thing. I mean, at this point, I feel like all of these people recognize that Donald Trump will be the nominee anyway. And so if they want to do, I mean, this offers them something of a platform to be able to at least come forward and say, look, I'm making a name for myself. It's not going to be Donald Trump forever. Or, I mean, if Donald Trump had his way, it would be. But in theory, the guy is almost 80 years old and he's facing 91 criminal charges. So I think I feel pretty comfortable in saying that it's not going to be Donald Trump forever. And at some point, somebody has to be lined up to be the heir apparent in the Republican Party. There is no bench, what with Donald Trump just constantly sucking up all of the oxygen in the room. And so at least this offers them some stage, literally and figuratively, to be able to come forward and introduce themselves to the Republican electorate. What they're not realizing is that by virtue of doing that, it does give Donald Trump a platform to attack them. So, like, Ron DeSantis was the darling of the Republican Party until Trump dug his claws into Ron DeSantis and turned him into a pariah in the Republican Party. And he has very little support, considering Donald Trump has had his way with him for so long. And all of the Trump supporters are decidedly unhappy with Ron DeSantis. But regardless, I think the more important thing, and they have to do something, right, to give themselves some plausible deniability here that they're actually running for president and to keep the donor dollars actually coming in. So they'll take their little swipes and do their little attacks because, you know, they need to just do something to show the donors that they're giving it the old college try. But at the end of the day, really what this is to Peter Hamby's point,
fake ID documents are a serious threat, easily ordered online.
And so
fake IDs can get used for anything from underage drinking to identity theft to terrorism. Think twice if you consider this a minor issue.
Which will actually...
There is a powerful and proven solution to protect IDs and check their authenticity. The kinogram. The kinogram is so difficult to imitate that fake ID documents are easily detected with the naked eye. Identity documents need secure protection. Learn more at kinogram.com.
We're in a doom loop anyway, so at this point I think we just assume that whatever bad things could happen are inevitably going to happen. I think something also worth noting is that this entire debate is happening on the backdrop of yet another election where Democrats vastly overperformed expectations. And so we're looking at the 2018 midterms, where Democrats had the biggest House margin of a midterm cycle in modern American history. The 2020 election cycle, where not only did Donald Trump himself lose by 7 million votes, but also lost both chambers of Congress. Then the 2022 election cycle, which was supposed to be this big red wave year, and instead of a red wave, Republicans got a majority of all of 5 seats in the House and still didn't manage to win the Senate. Then we have this year, 2023, this off-year election cycle, where, again, pundits were talking about the prospect of Democrats losing New Jersey, the New Jersey legislature. That's how doom and gloom it was from the mainstream media. And yet, and we'll get to that in a moment, but it was doom and gloom from everybody saying that, Republicans finally were going to have their overperformance that we've been waiting for. Glenn Youngkin was going to cruise to victory in Virginia and then basically use that as a launching pad for his own presidential ambitions. Instead, what we had were Democrats winning both ballot measures in Ohio, Democrats winning the governor's seat in deep red Kentucky, Democrats not only failing to give Glenn Youngkin his trifecta in Virginia, but Democrats flipping both chambers of the state legislature in Virginia, both the state Senate and the House of Delegates. We had Democrats competitive in the Mississippi governor's race. I mean, my God, if that's not a testament to the fact that Democrats vastly overperformed and Republicans completely shit the bed on this one, I don't know what is. And so now these people are going to come on stage, all of these Republicans, all of these Trump-lights are going to come on stage espousing the exact same Trumpism that just lost Republicans their God knows how many in a row election cycle just yesterday. And so that's the irony of all of this. They've spent so much time pretending to be Donald Trump and just doing the Donald Trump light thing because God forbid they do anything to piss him off or push themselves or push Donald Trump's base away. And so this whole time they're doing the whole Trump shtick, and the Trump shtick just lost them the third, fourth major election cycle in a row. Again, 2018, 2020, 2022, and we have these off-year cycle elections, 2023. Like, how many times are they going to prove themselves that all these people stand for is the America First agenda, is Trumpism? And yet, all of this is happening as we're just watching the voters reject Trumpism at every single turn. And so these people are going to go on stage, they're going to talk to basically the Republican base, this Trump base, but they're just entrenching this very agenda, this very like type of politics that is so repulsive to anybody who is not a Republican primary voter, that this is all just such a fool's errand. And look, far be it from me to interrupt our enemy while they're making a mistake. So if Republicans want to do this, if they want to sink themselves by continuing to dig in, to double down, triple down, quadruple down on the Trumpism, be my guest. Like, again, far be it from me to tell them to stop screwing themselves over. But I think what's important here to recognize is that, let me just go full screen on me, and we'll go, actually, let's pull up this. Okay, and I think the debate coverage is starting here. So I'll keep that muted for, actually, not going to mute it at all. I'm going to turn the sound up right now. Oh no, what am I talking about? We are an hour out. What am I talking about? We are an hour out until the debate actually begins here. And so this is NBC's pre-show coverage. I am 99% sure. Well, actually, I'm 100% sure now, because there is an empty stage up there. And if we've learned anything from the Trump era, it's that there will be no shortage of empty podium coverage. But I think I'll continue my pre-show, and as soon as these people take the stage here, then we'll continue that show. But I will stay full on this screen so that we can keep an eye on what's happening. Again, the people currently left in the Republican primary are, as you're seeing in this screen right here, Trump, Haley, DeSantis, Scott, Ramaswamy, and Chris Christie. And so, as I was saying before, all of these people are basically going to come on this screen and make it a little less distracting here, are basically going to come on this stage tonight and explain why they should be elected while running on the same Trumpism that has lost Republicans election after election after election. So, again, far be it from me to tell them to stop screwing themselves over, but it is kind of a weird conundrum that they've built for themselves, because the Republican Party basically put all their eggs in the basket that was Donald Trump in 2016 and made sure that their litmus test was Trumpism. And so what you have from that point is, if anybody basically comes forward and concedes objective reality, which is that, hey man, we're not winning any elections by endorsing and espousing Trumpism, endorsing Donald Trump and espousing Trumpism, if they come forward and say those things, they're going to get excommunicated from the party. And the flip side of that is, if they continue to espouse Trumpism and endorse his agenda, then they're going to lose at the hands of the voters. And so they're in this weird, like, double-edged sword. They're in this weird, like, catch-22, where nobody knows how to survive in these Republican primaries, because the only way to survive is to espouse Trumpism. But then once you get out of the primary, you're so radioactive, because all you've known how to do is basically kowtow to Donald Trump and be as extreme as him and pass all of his litmus tests to actually get to that point that none of the voters actually want. And so there would be a part of me that said I felt bad for them, but look, if there's anybody who told Republicans not to do that, it's the Democrats. It's the Democrats who have warned over and over and over again the dangers of basically hitching your wagon to someone that is Donald Trump, to hitching your wagon to what is Donald Trump. And so, they've done it despite all of the calls from those on the left not to do it, despite all of the warnings about how dangerous he is, despite all of the proof from the voters that they're not buying it. They've done it anyway, and now they're in a situation where that is the litmus test. The only way to win is to do Trumpism. And so now they're in a weird situation where they don't know how to get out of it. They're in this terrible, vicious cycle, and they have to keep pandering to Trump and losing elections, but they can't change anything. And so it's just this, like, what do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's exactly what we're seeing here. We're seeing the definition of insanity play out in that these people have to continue to espouse the very agenda that is losing them election after election after election. So, don't say we didn't warn you, but that's the situation that they got themselves stuck in, and that's the situation that doesn't look like it's abating anytime soon as Donald Trump continues to consolidate support week after week after week within the Republican primary. With that said, for anybody who watched my live stream yesterday, we had as good a night as we could have, almost as good a night as we could have possibly had. The only reason I say that is because Democrats didn't win the governor's seat in Mississippi, and the fact that winning the governor's seat in Mississippi was even a thought in any of our minds really is a testament to just how much Democrats overperformed in the last election. So Democrats, again, were able to secure victory on 2 ballot initiatives in Ohio. One was to enshrine abortion rights in the Ohio state constitution. The other is to legalize recreational marijuana in that state. Head on down to Virginia. The Republicans were looking to get themselves a Republican trifecta in that state, which would have allowed Governor Glenn Youngkin to pass an abortion ban, a 15-week abortion ban in the state. Virginia is currently the only state in the South that doesn't have an abortion ban right now. Glenn Youngkin wanted to change that. Instead of getting a Republican trifecta, Glenn Youngkin wanted both chambers of the state legislature, both the state Senate and the House of Delegates. So that is a harbinger of things to come in Virginia because they have their off-year elections. It's also a harbinger of things to come in 2024. Kentucky, Democrat Andy Beshear was reelected. A fun fact about Kentucky is that in the last 5 gubernatorial elections in Kentucky, they have accurately predicted the winner of the upcoming presidential election. So Kentucky, again, is one of those states that has off-year elections. In that year prior, whoever has won the Kentucky gubernatorial seat, that party has gone on to win the White House. So it's important to note that Andy Beshear, a Democrat, just won in this year, 2023, and so that would suggest that a Democrat is on his way if all things continue after these 5 cycles after these last 5 cycles. If the 6th cycle is the same, that would suggest that Democrats are on their way to victory in the White House in 2024. Heading on down to, let's see, what other states have I forgotten? Oh, Pennsylvania. There was a Pennsylvania Supreme Court election. Democrats won that race as well, which means that they now enjoy a 5-2 majority on the state Supreme Court, and I don't think that there's any doubt about the importance that state Supreme Courts have from everything from abortion legislation to fair maps to election litigation and everything in between. In fact, Pennsylvania was one of, if not the most litigated state in 2020 after Trump's whole effort to steal the 2020 election. So the fact that there is now a solid, progressive 5-2 majority on that state Supreme Court bodes really well, not just for legislation being upheld, progressive legislation being upheld, but also for attacks against democracy and efforts to undermine the democratic process that are inevitably coming up in 2024. So overall, a great night. I don't think that it could have gone much better for Democrats, and it gives us a lot of momentum as we head into 2024. And I think that's especially important because I know, and this is what I was alluding to before, I know that the media would love nothing more than to be able to both sides the political parties in disarray talking points. So right now it's been so long of Republicans being in disarray, of Republicans dealing with problems related to Donald Trump's litigation, Republican issues with losing elections, Republican issues with losing independence and suburban women thanks to their abortion stance, with Republicans being extreme on every issue you could possibly imagine. It's been so many years of basically bad news for Republicans that the media was frothing at the mouth to be able to both sides of this issue, and they wanted nothing more than to be able to point to Democrats and say, look, there's drama happening on the left. Finally, we've been waiting so long for drama on the left, and now we have bad polling for Joe Biden. We can talk about that ad nauseum, and then if and when Democrats underperform in this election, we can hinge the whole thing on around Joe Biden's neck and just spend the next 12 months harping on why Democrats are going to lose, why Joe Biden is a a weight on them, and how these 2023 elections went so terribly for the left. Obviously, they didn't get that, which is a bummer for mainstream media because they thrive off of both sides of them. But I think what's important to recognize is that when voters go out, they can both acknowledge that Joe Biden is old, and I don't think there's anybody who doesn't acknowledge that Joe Biden is old, and also that these elections don't happen in a vacuum. That it's not just, okay, I'm pulling the lever independent of any thought other than the fact that Joe Biden is old. It is, in actuality, yes, Joe Biden is old, but that doesn't overtake the importance of the fact that his opponent, Donald Trump, is an anti-democratic criminal who's currently a defendant in 4 different trials, contending with 91 criminal charges in 4 different jurisdictions, whose last major act in office was to incite an insurrection against our own government. I don't think, maybe I'm naive, but I don't think the American people can't recognize that one of those things is way more significant than the other. So asked in a vacuum whether people think it's an issue that Joe Biden is old does not accurately predict what we're going to see in this upcoming election. And that's something that we've seen over and over again, and that we saw just as recently as yesterday. Usually midterm elections or off-year elections or non-presidential elections, I should say, are referendums on the party in power, and the president who is currently sitting in the Oval Office. The fact that Democrats won in Kentucky, in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, and came close to winning in Mississippi should go to show that, yes, while these voters are conceding that Joe Biden is old, that does not overcome the fact that the Republican Party is steeped in anti-democratic tendencies, and that they are stripping women of their reproductive rights, and the Americans don't support that. They're against legalizing marijuana, and that Americans don't support that, that they are against certifying elections where they don't win, and the American people don't support that. So on issue after issue after issue, people are smart enough to realize that these elections are binary. They're a choice between 2 people. And you can have issues with one of those people in a vacuum, but that doesn't negate the issues that are happening, the more important issues, the more dangerous issues that we're contending with from the other side. So I know that there's going to be a lot of pearl clutching and fainting spells and bringing out the smelling salts when you watch mainstream media as far as it relates to the Joe Biden of it all. But I am not worried. We have a year left to go, and all of the indications that we've gotten thus far on how Democrats are performing relative to Republicans is that people are showing up, they're showing out, and they are recognizing that one party is far more extreme, far more dangerous than the other, and that they can put their issues with Joe Biden's age, for example, aside, because they understand that these elections are a choice between 2 people, they're binary, and they're not just, catnip for the media, which is like Joe Biden is old. So that is my rant on that. As always, for anybody watching right now, if you want to submit questions, just throw them in the chat. If you want to participate in the chat, all you have to do is subscribe to this channel. The chat is subscribers only. It doesn't cost you anything to be able to subscribe. With that said, just if you're not subscribed to this channel, definitely consider subscribing. It's the best way to support what I do. It's the best way to support live streams like this one here, and I always live stream major events like debates or election returns or anything like that. So again, you can throw your questions in the chat, and I'll make sure to respond to them. For those just joining right now, we are about 45 minutes away from this debate starting, and this debate is going to feature 5 people in the Republican primary. Obviously, Donald Trump will not be one of them, but it will feature Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Tim Scott. Frankly, I don't know what most of them, if not all of them, are still doing there. None of these people are really presenting much of a battle for Donald Trump. Chris Christie is consolidating that very narrow path of support in the Never Trump category of the Republican Party, which is maybe 20%, which isn't going to get you close to anything, at least anything close to what you need to actually win any of these states. I mean, these people really are, at the end of the day, playing for second place. Vivek Ramaswamy is just basically espousing the exact same Trumpism as Donald Trump himself. I can't imagine anybody would look at Vivek doing his Donald Trump cover band impression and think, oh yeah, I'm gonna opt for the cover band when the real thing is right there. I mean, that's the issue with not differentiating yourself one bit from Donald Trump. I get that it probably feels good in a Republican primary to do Donald Trump to a base of people who very much want Donald Trump. It's got to feel good when he's getting all that applause and he's getting popular with people who then will turn around and not vote for him because the real thing is right there. And again, maybe he's setting himself up for some political career in the future. Maybe he's just got so much money that it doesn't really matter, might as well burn it on something, and just getting more popular, raising his speaker fees might be exactly that. I'm not sure, but in any case, he is very clearly not playing to win, because I think if he was playing to win, he would at least try to differentiate himself from the one guy who is standing between himself and the presidency, and that is, of course, Donald Trump. Tim Scott really has failed to make much of a splash at all. In fact, he was the more like, I guess he kind of presented himself a little bit more moderate, but then slowly started devolving back into what they always and all devolved back into, which is just some weird, distorted form of Donald Trump himself. And so now, again, there's very little daylight between Tim Scott and Donald Trump, and yet Tim Scott thinks that putting no daylight between him and the guy who is standing between him and the presidency is somehow going to win him the presidency. It's not. And then, of course, Nikki Haley, who is the only candidate maybe who has some semblance of an idea of how to differentiate herself from the guy who still has some modicum of a viable path, maybe in the event that Donald Trump does end up in prison himself. But I would also argue that even if Trump were to end up in prison, that very likely would not stop him from continuing to run for president. I mean, there is no prohibition for running for president, even if you're in prison. You can't run for president if you're under 35 years old. You can't run for president if you are not a natural-born citizen. You also can't run for president if you've violated the 14th Amendment, which is that you've either participated in an insurrection or given aid and comfort to those who participated in an insurrection. And there are lawsuits going through the court system right now seeking to disqualify Donald Trump for exactly that issue. So in Colorado, we've seen a lawsuit, and I believe there's one happening in Florida as well. Eventually, these lawsuits are kind of going to converge, and it's going to be up to the federal court system all the way up to the Supreme Court to make some final ruling, because we're not just going to have disparate rulings in different state courts that determine one thing or the other. It's going to be up to the Supreme Court. It's going to hop from the state court system to the federal court system, and there they'll make a determination whether or not Donald Trump is deemed ineligible. And this has to happen quickly, by the way, because these states need time to be able to print the ballots and to get them out to people and to get their early ballots out to people who want to vote. And so if there's still a question as to whether or not Donald Trump is even on the ballot, that's an issue that has to be litigated pretty quickly. And so these things are happening in the court system right now. I presume that we may see some type of resolution as early as December. So that would be next month that we'll have some resolution on the issue of whether or not Donald Trump is disqualified based on the 14th Amendment. So we'll see what happens on that point. But all of which is to say, there doesn't seem to be any other prohibition for Donald Trump. And if he is found guilty in one of these cases, which will most likely be the soonest being the Washington, D.C. case, which is beginning in March of 2024, then, he can be sentenced, maybe end up in prison, and will very likely run from prison. I mean, I don't know, unless his base of support completely collapses. All of this is unprecedented, so if anybody comes to you and says that they know what's going to happen in this scenario, they're lying to you, because we've never dealt with anything like this. But it will be interesting to see what happens, especially in the coming months, because Donald Trump is facing some serious legal challenges, especially in this first case to start up, and that is the one in Washington, D.C. regarding his efforts to undermine the 2020 election. And there will be a resolution before the 2024 election actually happens. So if he's sentenced and convicted, he may very well be in jail, in prison, by the time the 2024 election actually rolls around. So if you want to follow on top of this stuff, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. I also do a legal show with Glenn Kirshner, who's a 30-year former federal prosecutor. We do episodes 4 or 5 days a week to discuss these cases these cases and these trials as they continue to make their way through the court system. Right now we're discussing the New York Attorney General case, where Donald Trump is contending with with a $250 million lawsuit, and basically very likely the end of his ability to do any business in the state of New York. So we're covering that right now. So again, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please make sure to subscribe. Okay, I told you to submit your questions to the chat if you have any, and I spent this entire time ranting and raving. So now I will go back to the chat and answer your questions. If you can tag me in your questions, it's easier for me to see. Can I give a reason why all the cases will converge? And so that's a reference to the insurrection cases. It's because whether or not Donald Trump runs for president is ultimately a federal issue. So they're starting off in state cases right now. So there's, like I said, a case in Colorado, there's going to be cases in Florida. Basically, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits popping up where if Republican secretaries of state, for example, put Donald Trump on the ballot, then people are going to sue to get him off the ballot. On the flip side, if Democratic secretaries of state refuse to put him on the ballot because they say he's disqualified under the 14th Amendment, then Republicans will sue to get him on the ballot. So there's going to be a bunch of disparate cases in different state courts. Eventually, they'll hop over to the federal system because the issue of whether or not somebody can run for president, ultimately, at the end of the day, does become a federal issue. So there is standing for the federal court system to take this issue over, and ultimately, it is going to be the U.S. Supreme Court that's going to have to rule one way or the other, and then the different states can take their cues from the Supreme Court, because you're not going to have, okay, the court system in Colorado says he's not, but then the court system in Florida says he is, and so then, I mean, that would just be too confusing, and it's not like an appropriate way to adjudicate any of these issues. And so it would hop over. Certain cases that start in federal court do have the ability to hop over to the federal court system. Who pays the GOP to be against legal weed? It's overwhelmingly popular. I don't know that it's a matter of, I don't think you have to be the Republican Party to be against something that a majority of Americans support. That's basically all of their positions. If you look at their position on abortion, it's something that more than 75% of Americans support, and yet the Republicans take the opposite position. So there's that. There's on gun rights, on universal background checks. Universal background checks has like 90% support across the country. Republicans are against it. So you don't have to necessarily pay them. It's like they try to find minoritarian positions that just run completely counter to what the vast majority of Americans want, and then place themselves in that camp. And instead of, I don't know, instead of just figuring out, okay, we're trying to win over voters so that we can remain a viable party in the future, they just opt not to, and instead double down on the voter suppression and election denialism. So they are so adverse to this idea of maybe opening up their ranks or trying to land on policy positions that are more popular, that instead they're just kind of condemning themselves to supporting positions that are so aggressively unpopular, and then just rigging the rules of the game when it actually comes time to elect somebody. So where am I currently? I'm actually currently in DC, and that's because I have a big interview coming up. So if you want to see who that interview's with, and I'm not going to say who it's with right now on the off chance that it gets canceled because, it's happened before. But I did travel to DC. I've only done a few interviews in person, so that should give you a testament to the importance of this one. So if you want to check out that interview, here's my shameless plug. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. It's coming out in just a couple of days. Am I concerned about no labels or another third party potentially hurting Biden? Of course I am. I mean, it would be crazy not to be concerned about the prospect of a third party hurting Biden. I think that what these third party groups or these independent groups should recognize, especially the ones that are operating under the pretense that they don't want Donald Trump to be president, but they don't think that Joe Biden has the support necessary to become president. Two things on that. The first is Joe Biden has been president and has consistently overseen not only legislative wins, but electoral wins. So, again, we're looking at 2023, the elections that happened literally yesterday, where Democrats, again, overperformed. Won elections in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Kentucky. It's hard to look at that, an election that is always a referendum on the guy sitting in the Oval Office, and say after Democrats swept all of these races that Joe Biden is somehow incapable of winning. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, I mean, it's just false on its face, right? A lot of this polling shows that if third-party candidates come forward, that they kind of give a permission structure for these Republicans who don't want to hold their nose and vote for Trump to at least vote for somebody else. And right now, that person, with absent somebody else, absent some RFK Jr., Cornel West, or whoever it is, absent somebody else, that person is Joe Biden. If somebody is not happy with Donald Trump, they don't have a permission structure when it's just between two people to vote for some third person. It's Joe Biden. That is their permission structure to not vote for Donald Trump. But when you give them a third person, that does give them that permission structure. And this way they can say, look, I'm not a Democrat. I don't want to support the Democrats, but I didn't want to vote for Donald Trump, so instead I'll vote for somebody else. And so they vote for somebody else, and that vote would have otherwise been for Joe Biden. Because if they absolutely can't stomach voting for Trump, and Joe Biden's the only other person on the ballot, and I feel like I'm explaining this to you, and everybody watching right now understands it. The people who don't understand it are these candidates who are happy to just collect money. They're strategists who are happy to collect money, and who just like view themselves with this God complex, like the Dean Phillips of the world. Who is Dean Phillips? He's voted with Joe Biden 100% of the time. So he's not offering a different policy platform from Joe Biden. He's just coming forward and saying like, look, I'm exactly the same as him legislatively. I have no way to actually differentiate myself from that guy, and yet I think you should vote for me for president of the United States, and I'm not going to really give any other reason why other than I was born earlier. And like, that ain't it. That's not going to give anybody, that's not like a viable opportunity, but it's allowing him to raise his profile, raise some money, and Steve Schmidt, who is his advisor, to also make a pretty penny while doing it. So a lot of this does come down to money and ego. If Trump distances himself from abortion or says he'll leave it to the states, could that hurt the Democrats' advantage right now? I mean, he can try to distance himself, and he absolutely will. Like, make no doubt about it. Donald Trump, as soon as we get to the general election, he will pivot as shamelessly as you could possibly imagine and suggest that, oh, he's actually a moderate when it comes to abortion. And so that's the importance of making sure that with all these quotes and rallies that he's doing right now, where he's coming out and saying, I'm the reason that Roe was overturned, that we make sure we air them on a relentless loop, that we make sure we remind people. Because remember, most people who are going to vote in 2024 are not paying attention right now. And they won't be for 10 months. And so we can just assume wrongly that everyone's going to remember what Donald Trump said as far as appointing the 3 Supreme Court justices who then overturned Roe, because we've seen it. But I think there's a lot of importance in continuing to air these ads, continuing to share this stuff, continuing to share these quotes, and because while it may be the 10th time that we've all seen it, it's maybe the first time that somebody else has seen it. And I guarantee you that it will be the first time that most people see it as we get closer toward September or October of 2024. So it might be annoying when you hear the repetition, but I would actually argue that if you hear us repeating, if you hear me or anybody else repeating these ideas about what Donald Trump said with regard to taking credit for abortion Roe being overturned, if you hear that stuff being repeated, don't be annoyed that you're hearing it for the 10th time or the 50th time or the 100th time. Be happy that Democrats are finally understanding the importance of repetition, because Republicans do it. And if I say build the wall, everybody knows what we're talking about. If I say make America great again, everybody knows what you're talking about. If I say lock her up, everybody knows what you're talking about, because they understand that if you are trying to do, if you're trying to brand something, that repeating it is going to help them, and they do that over and over and over again. And I know it's crazy for most people to hear that, because it's like, how can you repeat the same thing over and over and over again and not feel like you're treating your supporters like they're dumb? But in actuality, it is a great marketing tool, and also it shows that, like, even if you've heard something 1,000 times, it may be the first time that somebody else has heard it. And this way everybody gets to hear it. And for the people who've heard it 1,000 times, it sticks. And for the people who've heard it for the first time, now they know it. So it is important to recognize, like, the importance of repetition. I personally will make sure to repeat this stuff ad nauseum. I apologize for the people who've heard it 100 times, but again, we should be glad that Democrats are finally understanding the importance of repetition. Do I think there will be any difference that there are NBC moderators? I think that maybe we'll see some of these candidates being held to account a little bit more. I think that'll be kind of an interesting tell. Maybe more than the Fox moderators, but that'll definitely be something worth looking out for in tonight's debate. How will the ruling in Minnesota impact the eligibility cases moving forward? I haven't had a chance to look into the Minnesota ruling, so stand by on that, put a pin in that, and I'll get back to you on the Minnesota of it all. For those who are just joining, it is now 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. We are 30 minutes out from this third Republican debate beginning. So if you're just tuning in, this debate is just between 5 people. Donald Trump will not be there, but it will be Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Tim Scott. And we're just doing a pre-show right now. So for anybody just joining, if you have questions that you'd like me to answer, throw your questions in the chat. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel, and then you'll be able to participate in the chat. What would I put Marianne Williamson's chances of winning a primary at? I would put them probably as close to 0 as I could get. I don't think that she's going to offer any type of like a viable primary challenge to Joe Biden. Do I think that Donald Trump's Georgia trial will take place before the election? That's a good question. It's going to be close. I know that if it can, this is the group to be able to do it. It doesn't look like Fani Willis's office in Fulton County is wasting any time at moving forward. So if it can happen, it will. And I say that because if you look at what's happening in Florida, it looks like that judge is doing everything in her power to make sure that that trial doesn't happen before the election. Right now it's slated, I believe, for May of 2024. So on paper, that should begin and end before the 2024 election. But we've had a lot of indications and a lot of signaling from Judge Aileen Cannon, who, by the way, has already interfered in the case on Trump's behalf and was admonished by an appeals court that was just above her federal court. But I think that there is a good chance that we will not see that case go to trial. What also, I guess, remains to be seen is when the next batch of defendants is brought forward in Fulton County. So right now, that first batch was supposed to be Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesbrough. Obviously, both of them agreed to plea deals, and so that trial goes away. But they can't just start the next trial immediately with the next batch of defendants because none of these defendants were prepared to go to trial before, and they need a certain amount of time to be able to do that. So they're going to need 3 to 4 months regardless. So it's November right now. We can probably expect that the next batch of defendants will be scheduled to go to trial somewhere in maybe March of 2024. Whether Donald Trump is part of that batch will not only depend on what prosecutors want to do and how many more plea deals they take, but also the schedule for the other trials. So remember, the Washington, D.C. trial is happening in March. So that means he won't be available for both the Washington, D.C. prosecution in federal court and also the state prosecution in Fulton County, Georgia. So there's scheduling conflicts. There's whether or not other co-defendants are going to flip. Right now, we've had a number of co-defendants, Kenneth Chesbrough, Scott Hall, Kenneth Chesbrough, Sidney Powell, and I'm going to beat myself up for not remembering this last name because I've covered it ad nauseum, and I'm sure that people will throw it into the chat. But there has been 4 flips in that trial so far. Man, I'm not going to forgive myself for not knowing, for not remembering this last flip against Donald Trump. Oh, Jenna Ellis. Jenna Ellis was the last one. So everybody so far who had the opportunity to testify in trial or defend themselves in this trial has opted instead to just cooperate with prosecutors. So we'll see what happens on that front. But I don't know. It's a big question mark as to whether the Fulton County case is going to happen before the 2024 election. If the House goes back to Democrats, what do you think their majority will look like in terms of numbers? I am actually very bullish on the Democrats' numbers in the House for 2 reasons. The first is if you look at the way things are going right now, Democrats have overperformed in special elections by by an average of 10 points. But I think Democrats flipped a New Jersey legislative district by like 35 points yesterday. So there are some wild swings to the left that we're seeing right now, and that is a harbinger of things to come. The last time that we saw these kind of numbers were before the 2018 midterm cycle, where, as soon as Donald Trump got into power, all of a sudden we were seeing this backlash to Donald Trump, and Democrats were winning, were winning in huge numbers. And so we're seeing that right now again. And again, I would reiterate the fact that Democrats are just coming off of major election wins in Kentucky, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, and in Virginia last night. So that's one thing. I think just the environment, the political environment right now is there is a lot of momentum in Democrats' favor. But the second thing that I think is especially important to recognize is that there are a number of cases happening or going through the courts right now where Democrats, a lot of them led by Mark Elias, who is the top voting rights attorney in the country. I have a show with him on this channel called Democracy Watch, where we've spoken about all of these cases. Democrats are litigating gerrymandered maps based on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act or based on the 14th Amendment, racial gerrymandering claims, in states across the country. In Alabama, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Texas, in Florida, in South Carolina, in Utah, and I'm sure I'm missing quite a few more. But a lot of these maps are going to be struck down, and we're going to see opportunity districts or black majority districts added, where Republicans had gerrymandered these districts to their own benefit. And so already we've seen judges come forward and order new maps in Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana. We're going to see this happen in Texas, where we can see as many as 3 to 5 seats based on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And again, we have states that we're waiting to see litigation from in South Carolina and Utah, most likely in North Carolina, although this is brand new what's happening in North Carolina because they just reviewed their maps. In New York, we're going to see new maps drawn, and we can see 4 to 6 new seats for Democrats. So just on redrawn gerrymandered maps alone, we can see as many as a dozen new seats for Democrats. And then you add in the fact that a third thing is that there are currently 18 Republicans sitting in Biden-won districts right now. And by the way, every single one of those Republicans just voted for Mike Johnson to represent that party, to make him second in line to the presidency. And that is a guy who doesn't think that LGBT people should have a right to exist, who doesn't believe that there should be any cutouts for abortion. He believes that abortion should be banned nationwide. I mean, this guy is as extreme as it gets. And so all of those Republicans who are currently sitting in Biden-won districts basically own Mike Johnson's extremism now, because they all cast their ballots unilaterally for the guy. And so between those three things, between the political environment, between the fact that we have 18 Republicans currently sitting in Biden-won districts, and between the fact that we have election lawsuits in as many, in like a dozen states right now that can impact over a dozen seats, all of that points to the fact that Democrats have a really good environment, at least in the House, heading into 2024. Obviously, the Senate is an entirely different story, and we have an uphill battle in the Senate because we're defending seats in red territory, in Montana, in Ohio, in West Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in Arizona. I mean, our offensive opportunities are Texas and Florida. And that should give you an indication of just how rough that map is for Democrats, that our only opportunities to actually pick up seats are in 2 states that are not easy for Democrats to win statewide in, and haven't won statewide in quite a long time. So at least in the House, I do feel bullish about Democrats' opportunity to take as many as 20 to 30 seats. So I feel good about that. The Senate is where we're going to have to invest a lot of time and resources to turn people out. Newsom-Whitmer ticket. Thoughts? So here's my thoughts on this. I think that we have a very, very, very strong bench. Do I think anybody's going to challenge Biden for 2024? No. I think Biden has the incumbency advantage. He has the fact that he's passed a ton of major legislative accomplishments, and he has the fact that he keeps winning as president. So none of these people are going to challenge him. If they were going to, they'd have done it already. But with that said, as we head into 28, we have a very deep bench, probably the deepest bench that we've ever had as Democrats, or at least that I can remember. And not only is the bench deep, but these people are capable and can win. I mean, you look at people like, to the point of the question I just got, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris. There are J.B. Pritzker. Like, there are a number of young Democrats who are vying, obviously, for a more national profile, and they're all very smart and capable and talented politicians. And so I think for the first time, Democrats should feel really good about the prospects of a strong bench as we head into 2028. Do I think there will be another Biden-Trump debate in the general election? I was just speaking about this today, actually. I don't know that there will be a Trump-Biden debate, because I don't know that Donald Trump will be willing to take any debate that's not completely on his own terms, and I don't know that Joe Biden will want to do a debate with Trump knowing that he's not going to basically play by any of the rules. So I don't know. I mean, there's two sides to this coin. One is, and I've changed my opinion on this a little bit, which is there are a lot of people who say, don't platform Donald Trump, you don't want to give him the oxygen. But I think when people are able to recognize who Donald Trump is right now and remember who he is, because he's been been away from our TVs and news feeds for so long until recently, and it kind of gives us the opportunity to remember the lunacy that was his presidency. And so, whereas before I was like, look, I don't want to give this guy oxygen, now I do think that there is some benefit in making sure that people remember who he is, remember the chaos and the mayhem and the dysfunction, and there is a reason why he lost to Joe Biden by 7 million votes in 2020. And I think if you remind people and don't let them memory hole who Donald Trump was when he was president, just because a few years have gone by and we all have the collective memory of a goldfish, I think if you don't allow people to memory hole who he was, it reminds them of exactly why they turned out and voted for Democrats in such large numbers in these last few elections. And so I think that's important to keep on doing. So to that point, maybe that is a mark in Joe Biden's favor in terms of getting on stage and debating with Donald Trump. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen on that front. I don't know if Donald Trump would even want to, but I guess that remains to be seen. I mean, look, we have a debate tonight, and Donald Trump isn't showing up, and he hasn't shown up to the other two either. So I'm not sure what's going to happen on that front, but I guess one step at a time. Just joining right now, we are about 15 minutes away, or 18 minutes here, from this third debate starting. This debate will not feature Donald Trump, per usual. It'll feature Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Tim Scott, and Nikki Haley, who I guess are all vying for second place. This is just a battle to see who gets the silver medal. It's the battle of the first loser here. So no one really has been posing much of a challenge to Donald Trump in all of this time, and I don't presume that suddenly anything will change, especially since Trump is consolidating more and more support as this continues to progress. So yeah, I think that we will just see more mealy-mouthed quasi attacks on Donald Trump, maybe more likely is these people pivoting to attack Joe Biden. Which kind of does seem kind of useless at the end of the day, because I don't really understand the point of attacking Joe Biden in a Republican primary debate when this will be the end of the road for you. I mean, you should want, if you're running for president, ostensibly, to actually get past the primary, but none of these people seem all that interested in doing that. And so instead, we're just in the midst of this doom loop where Republicans keep showing up on stage to vie for second place so that they can just lose, and that's it. But here we are, and it's going to be a circus, so we might as well laugh at the clowns. Can we trust polls? Look, I don't think the polls were especially off yesterday. They were off by a few points. There definitely is a Republican bias in most of the polls that we've seen thus far by a few points. I think the polls serve a good purpose. If we look at them and they have that Republican bias, it should just be a tool to energize and turn out Democratic voters. That's it. We should look at the polls and say like, things are not going as rosy as we anticipated. Use that as motivation to turn people out. Not to curl up into a ball in the fetal position and say this thing is all over, but use it as motivation to continue working to turn people out. Remember, in 2020, in one of the closest states in the country, Wisconsin, the difference between a Trump win and a Biden win was 1 vote per precinct. That's it. Had the Republicans been able to turn out 1 more voter per precinct in that state, Donald Trump would have won in Wisconsin, and then 1 step closer, 1 step more validated in the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. But if you don't think that, like, just a few people, or just you in your small circle can have, like, an outsized impact on these elections, you're mistaken. Because, again, 1 vote per precinct is not a lot, especially in these races with tight margins. And it's not just the battleground states either. I mean, I live in California. California has, I believe 6 different congressional districts where the Republican won by just, like, either hundreds or a couple thousand votes. That's it. I mean, there are close races in a lot of these states. New York, we can expect to see swings of 4 to 6 seats in the Democrats' favor if the Democrats are able to turn out in 2024. New York and California are not battlegrounds, right? And yet there are a number of close districts where we still need Democrats to turn out, even if it's not statewide that close in the state. Here's an interesting one. If Donald Trump is convicted, could the RNC take him off the ballot at the convention? I don't know the specific rules. I would presume that they couldn't take him off the ballot because, in theory, if he has those electors, then I'm not sure what the rules are in terms of electors having to vote for people who they're pledged to in each state. But I don't know. I mean, we may very well confront this exact scenario where Donald Trump may be convicted. I mean, look, his Washington, D.C. trial, which is at the hands of Judge Chutkan, who is an Obama appointee, at the hands of the DOJ, that has a very high conviction rate, well over 95%, does not look good for him. And we all saw him commit his crimes out in the open. That's happening in March, and that trial should take, I don't know, 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, 6 weeks. We don't know yet. It depends how long it actually takes. But either way, it's going to end before the election in 24. And if he's sentenced and convicted, he may very well be in prison by the time the 2024 election rolls around. And for those who are asking, well, can he appeal? Yeah, of course he can appeal. He will appeal. But appeals take months, and appeals take months, if not years. And so if he thinks, and you're not exempt from serving your time while you're pending appeal, you are in prison pending appeal, or wherever he's sentenced to. He may be sentenced to home detention. He may be, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm 10 steps ahead of the cart here, but it could be a dire situation. All of this is unprecedented. I don't know how the RNC would deal with it. I don't know how his voters would deal with it. I think I know how the general electorate would deal with it, which is that they probably wouldn't be very inclined to pull the lever in the voting booth for someone who's currently sitting in a prison cell, but I've been proven wrong before, and I've underestimated Donald Trump's potency with an electorate before, so we will see. Are the Republican candidates hoping to win if Trump ends up as president? And this is a point I made earlier today, but yes, I mean, there is the possibility that they could be running, if not for second place right now, or for 2028 at some point in the future, they could very well be running because they think that there is a strong possibility that Donald Trump does end up in prison. And if that's the case, and his support, if the bottom falls out in his support, well then suddenly Republicans will need somebody if it becomes clear that Donald Trump can't be the guy. And if you have somebody who's just gone through an entire election cycle and who's gotten second place in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and all these states, then maybe they're a viable alternative. Maybe these people are just becoming like the break glass in the case of emergency candidate. Although I would argue that the prospects of Donald Trump getting convicted are a lot higher than break glass in the case of emergency. I think that there's a very good chance that Donald Trump will face some type of conviction in at least the Washington, D.C. trial alone. For those just joining right now, thank you for joining. We are about 10 minutes out from the third Republican debate beginning. Donald Trump will not be present at this debate. It'll be Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Chris Christie, and Ron DeSantis. I'm answering questions right now that folks have. If you want to participate and throw a question in the chat, all you have to do is subscribe. Once you're subscribed, you can participate in the chat. It's also a great way to support this pre-show, these live streams, what I do, and to see the rest of the content. It does not cost anything, so if you're not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing to this channel. Again, we are about 10 minutes away from this debate actually beginning. This one's hosted by NBC, so two things on that. One, it'll probably be tougher questions from the moderators, and second is my channel won't be copyright struck. So that was a fun thing. Fox decided to strike all of the progressive channels. Actually, I think all of the channels, even across the political spectrum, used the feed for something to an open democracy. Anyway, if you want to throw questions in the chat, go ahead, and I will do my best to answer them. Who do I think has the best VP chance? So here's my thoughts on Donald Trump's VP selection. I think he wants somebody
Black Friday igång på Boost. Shoppa med upp till 80% extra rabatt. Allt Boostlet. Let's outlet.
want somebody who fills this weird slot because they have to be adequately subservient to him, adequately loyal to him, let's say, but they also can't be a show stealer because then the attention will be on the person who wants all the attention, which is not himself. So I have concerns, I have skepticism when it comes to someone like Carrie Lake, for example, from Arizona. Not just because she apparently has already won the gubernatorial election, so she is currently the governor of Arizona. I think that's going to pose some problems serving as both the governor of Arizona, but also Donald Trump's vice president. So that's going to pose some problems. But also the fact that she wants the attention. She is a TV person just like Donald Trump is a TV person. I don't think he's going to want to relinquish that attention to somebody else. So, I don't know, might he be looking at someone like Nikki Haley, for example, who isn't flashy, but may be able to deliver him some moderates. We've heard from Donald Trump himself that a second administration, a second-term administration, would be a hell of a lot more extreme than the first, and there would be a lot of people who are just there to start getting retribution against his political opponents, and that, the moderating forces that were Rex Tillerson and Jeff Sessions, these people are extreme unto themselves, but not compared to the people who Donald Trump would put in. These people would completely vanish and be replaced by hardliners. I mean, I'm talking Jeffrey Clark, John Eastman, Stephen Miller, these hardliners who kind of share Donald Trump's worldview and his fascist impulses. And so I think there's a lot to be worried about. But in terms of the VP selection, I'm not sure that he would want someone who can garner too much attention. If I had to guess, and again, this and $5 will get you a foot long in Subway, but if I had to guess, there might be something to be said for a Nikki Haley. That's probably what I would guess. It kind of gives some people a permission structure to be able to vote for him who might see her as moderating force on him. Then again, Donald Trump had initially chosen Mike Pence as a moderating force, as a permission structure for those evangelicals, and he tried to hang the guy at the end, so he might not have a stomach for a moderating force when it comes to the Republican candidates. I don't know. I couldn't pay into Donald Trump's head and figure out what he's thinking. So I'm not exactly sure what's from. Are these candidates we're seeing today really the only alternatives to Trump that conservative Republican voters will have to choose from? In theory, I mean, there are still people running. There's Asa Hutchinson who's running, who hasn't garnered enough support to even be on the stage. I don't think he's going to pose any real challenge. I'm not sure. I mean, could Don Jr. just say, if at the convention it becomes a contested convention or something, and Don Jr. just say, throw my hat in the ring, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Carrie Lake, and they just do that? I don't know. In theory, that's what the primary process is going to show. And so I would imagine that these, well, I was going to say 5, but these 6 candidates, because it's including Donald Trump, will be the ones who actually make the ballots and go through this process. So I presume, yes, who we're seeing tonight are going to be the options in terms of who Republican voters are going to have to choose from. But at the end of the day, it's not really going to matter. It's going to be Donald Trump who they're going to choose. I mean, he's consolidating 50-60% of the support. He's going to win every state with those numbers. The big question mark is going to be what happens with his prosecution. What do I suspect is Christie's end goal for this run? He's smart enough to know being anti-Trump will ostracize him from Republican politics and media. Yes, but exactly. I think he is smart enough to know, and I think he's cashing out on that right now. Remember, Chris Christie is not in Republican politics, and he's not in Republican media. He is a contributor to ABC News. So, and there's nothing that Democrats love more than a Republican, like some born-again Republican, coming out and saying, like, you gotta speak out against Trump. Look at the Lincoln Project, right? Democrats are basically falling over themselves to hand the keys to the kingdom to the Lincoln Project and the Chris Christies of the world. But, like, Chris Christie knows that. He knows that when he writes a book that the Donald Trump base is not going to be buying that book at his latest rally, that it's going to be lips who want to see that, like, somebody who's close to Donald Trump has turned away from him. That's why Michael Cohen does the same thing. Like, there are a lot of people who are in Trump's orbit who know that they're going to be excommunicated from the Republican Party. They're fine with it. And they know that they can get their audience on the left, and that's what they're doing. Chris Christie currently is on a network that is not a right-wing network. So he knows exactly what he's doing. And so he doesn't care. This is the end goal for this run is to continue raising his national profile so that he can sell more of his books, or he can have a higher speaker fee, or whatever it is that he ultimately wants to do. Okay, looks like candidates are taking the stage. We are about 3 minutes out from this debate beginning. 3 minutes out. Okay, I'm going to mute that feed for now while we get through this final couple minutes, and I'll try to answer one more question. We have just a couple of minutes. For those just joining right now, this debate is just beginning in a couple of moments. If you're not yet subscribed and you want to support this live stream and this channel and this coverage right now, please make sure to subscribe. It does not cost you anything. I would definitely appreciate it, and you'll be able to follow along with subsequent live streams as I continue to host them. Have I picked my rules for our drinking game yet? Let's see. What are the words that we have to look out for tonight? It's probably going to be socialism is one of them. Open borders is another one of them. The unborn is another one. So partial birth or partial birth abortion or post-birth abortion. That's the bonus one. So yeah, it's just it's a Mad Libs of what you would see in a Fox News comment section. It really is some depressing stuff. But then again, this is the doom loop we're stuck in right now. So it goes. Okay, we are 2 minutes out here. 2 minutes out, all of the candidates have taken their places on the stage. It's Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Tim Scott. And of course, Donald Trump has not shown up tonight, and he hasn't shown up in the same way that he hasn't shown up to any of these debates. All right, we are just over a minute out here.
They did a super PAC, did a series of ads focusing on the Trump indictments. It actually empowered them, they felt. They actually didn't run the ads because it was going to be it backfired. Well, explain to me on the Republican side how that works.
It's not just about Donald Trump.
Okay, we have just about a little over 1 minute to go. So for those just joining right now, again, this debate is starting in about a minute. All right, here's an easy one. I'm being asked whether I drink tea, coffee, and do I dunk? I guess something in tea or coffee. I don't drink any caffeine because I was always worried that if I drank any caffeine that I would be reliant on it for the rest of my life. So I don't drink tea or coffee. I just wake up with water because I'm a masochist, apparently. All right, we are less than a minute away from this debate actually beginning. Again, I will increase the volume as soon as this debate actually begins. Right now there's just a little bit of commentary from the folks there.
The second this thing is over, Tom and I are going to be back for the post-debate show here in the spin room, talking with candidates live,
all right.
breaking down all the big...
I would just ask, for those who've watched this pre-show, we've been going for a little over an hour now. Oh, actually, we've been going for about, an hour and 15 minutes. If you've watched this pre-show and you've enjoyed my coverage, please consider subscribing to this channel. Again, it's completely free, does not cost you anything, but that's the best way to support what I do and to support these live streams. I definitely appreciate it. Again, just hit the subscribe button, and that way you can also participate in the chat on this stream. And here we go.
Tonight, a critical test in the race for the White House. 5 Republicans battling to become their party's 2024 presidential nominee. The candidates ready to make their case on why they're prepared to be commander-in-chief amid 2 wars on the world stage, how they plan to tackle stubborn inflation, and how they can unite a deeply divided electorate. Who is best to take on President Biden? And can any of them first beat former President Trump, who's far ahead in the polls? The candidates are here. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
From NBC News, the Republican presidential debate. Live from the Adrian Arst Center in Miami, Florida.
Presidential debate. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press.
Hello, I'm Hugh Hewitt, host of Salem Radio's The Hugh Hewitt Show.
We are now just 68 days from the Iowa caucuses when Republican primary voters will begin to determine their party's nominee for president. Tonight, we'll question 5 candidates seeking that nomination on how they're best prepared to be commander-in-chief. And, of course, how best to bring down prices impacting Americans across the country. We have 2 hours for a serious debate on the issues that matter most to Republican voters. Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers and the opportunity for a closing statement. Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. We want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or speak over your fellow debaters. If you talk over each other, the voters can't hear you. And given the critical issues we're facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say. Continued interruptions may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause so that the candidates can be heard. With that said, let's have a good debate. All right, our first question, the opening question, is one for all of you. Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to run for the White House again. And he remains popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
This country is in trouble, and the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you. I will fight for you. I will make sure to lead this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we won a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee, next November I'll get the job done, and as president, I will deliver.
Your time is up. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Why you and not the former president?
Well, I think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues. Now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency in the classroom. As a mom, I know what that means. Let's make sure we secure our borders so that our families are safe. Let's get crime down because our families want to know that they can be safe no matter where they go. And as the wife of a combat veteran, I will tell you, the military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is...
Ambassador, thank you very much. Let me just caution the audience, let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please, keep restraining yourselves, and it would be helpful so we can hear the candidates because these are important issues and the voters want and need to hear them. Mr. Ramaswamy,
my worst nightmare is that buffering. Shouldn't happen again. We should be all good.
Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party. You think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years. Was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go. Mr. Roberts, this is how we get our country back. We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to Governor Christie. Why you?
Somebody wants a soundbite on Fox News. Somebody wants to be the next Tucker Carlson guest.
The candidates speak. Governor Christie, why you and not former President Trump?
Well, Lester, look, you said it at the beginning of the debate. We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old band back together. He's starting in Ukraine, and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that. We have inflation in this country that is choking every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country. It needs to be said.
Thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the truth of my life destroys the lies of the radical left. We need a president and a candidate who will actually help our base solidify and attract independent voters into our party, the great opportunity party.
You can't say the phrase radical left and then attract moderate voters.
Because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring faith, restoring our Christian values that will help this nation once again become the city on the hill. When Ronald Reagan talked about the city on the hill, he was coming from Matthew 5. When President Lincoln talked about a house divided, that was Mark. Our founding documents speak to the importance of a faith foundation. You don't have to be a Christian for America to work for you, but America does not work without a faith-filled Judeo-Christian foundation. I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future. Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies matter. We have to get back to being a nation that is, in fact, the city on the hill, that believes in each other enough for us to fight for that future.
Senator Scott, thank you. We're going to turn now to the challenges facing the next commander-in-chief. You'll all be fielding questions first from me and the Republican Jewish Coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain remain captive there and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel in word and in deed, in public and in private. And I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes over to Israel, and I brought back over 700 people to safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted, and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, support Israel with whatever they need whenever they need it, and 3, make sure we bring our hostages home. We need to be very clear-eyed to know there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to hit our military men and women if it hadn't been for Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. And there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. They are the tip of the spear when it comes to this Islamic terrorism, and we need to make sure that we have their backs in that process.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy. Mr. Ramaswamy, any daylight between you and the candidates we just heard on this issue? What you would tell the Prime Minister?
In terms of what I would tell the Prime Minister, no. In fact, I would go one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border. And then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multi-millionaire. So I think that that's wrong what Republicans do or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
Ramaswamy.
On stage today. Thank you. Senator Scott, yes, Senator, same question to you about, you're the president, you're on the phone in the Oval Office with the Prime Minister, you tell him what?
Well, number one, I would tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map, we will support you. We will be there with you. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. There will be no daylight. But I would change the station a little bit, though, and head back home to America. I would say to President Biden, Diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference, you cannot just continue to have strikes in Syria on warehouses. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. In order for us to have a powerful response from America, we have to be in a position of strength. As President of the United States, my foreign policy is simple. You cannot negotiate with evil. You have to destroy it.
All right, Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Chris, I want to get you to weigh in here.
Look, Lester, these problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time, to preserve the state of Israel. Remember that Hamas's main goal is to get rid of Israel, is to get Israel absolutely off the map. Now, there are three things I think I would say to him when he asks for advice. The first I would say is that it is absolutely your obligation to protect the territorial integrity of Israel. Secondly, to make sure you protect the security and the safety of your people. Every time something happens to compromise either one of those things, it creates greater unrest in the entire region. Second, you must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again. The fact is that Israel and their intelligence community failed. They failed here, and they failed the people of the state of Israel. And so we need to work closely and better together to make sure, one, that they're degraded, and two, that we know everything that's going on inside the Gaza Strip when it's going on, so that something like this can't happen to kill 1,400 individuals again. And the third thing is to keep your eye on the ball. Make sure that we continue to isolate Iran, work with the reasonable nations in the Middle East, the other Arab nations who want to partner with you, and make sure that we continue to isolate Iran so that their only friends in the world are the part of the evil force of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Governor Christie, thank you very much. And we're going to continue in this vein right now with a question from Matthew Brooks, the CEO of the Republican Jewish Coalition, a partner of the Republican National Committee in this debate. Here it is.
Given attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, attacks that have wounded approximately 24 U.S. servicemen, do you support the use of military force by the United States against Iran?
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
We've got two of you on stage.
The second thing that I will say is I wear heels are not for a fashion statement, they're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq and Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal. Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home. Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. If I can continue with you, just today the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last week. It's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had Al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as Commander-in-Chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members be sitting ducks, and that's true whether it's Iran or whether it's any country on the world. We have to be strong, and we have to defend the people who defend us.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism?
Mr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that?
Absolutely. I think the scourge of anti-Semitism across this country, including in places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America. Death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism to irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about when they're siding with Hamas over Israel. They are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words, soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators have lost their way, and we need leadership at the top in the United States of America that restores our founding values and that has no place for this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That's where I stand while respecting our Constitution.
Your time is out. Senator Scott, let me get you to weigh in on what you just heard.
Well, let me just say to every single university president in America, federal funding is a privilege, not a right. Number one. Number two, to every student who've come to our country on a visa to a college campus, your visa is a privilege, not a right. Number three, any campus that allows for anti-Semitism and hate, to allow students to encourage terrorism, mass murder, and genocide, you should lose your federal funding today, period. To all the students on visas who are encouraging Jewish genocide, I would deport you from those campuses. We have to stand strong with our Jewish Americans. At the end of the day, we should not have our Jewish students in a library being told to hide. On our streets in New York, a Jewish citizen has the right to walk on the streets of America with no fear. They have the right to go to college campuses, go to class, and not fear. We will restore that. I started working on anti-Semitism on college campuses in 2017 because even then there was a rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. We must force the people off those campuses and frankly,
thank you. Let me
out of our country.
Let me turn to the Governor DeSantis. What do you think about what he just said?
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked. Second, I have friends here in Florida who their kids do not feel safe even going to university campus at all outside of the state of Florida. You have Jewish students fleeing for their lives at Cooper Union. Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group, Students for Justice of Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. That is what we have to confront. And as president, I can tell you this, we are not going to stand for this on college campuses any longer.
All right, Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Governor Christie, and considering what he just said, you led a state with a sizable Muslim population. Last month, as you know, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed in Illinois by his landlord. His mother was also stabbed more than a dozen times in what has been charged as a hate crime. What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and with the members of the mosques. And I said to them, law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion, if you are going to comply with the law. And we developed fabulous relationships with Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Governor Christie, thank you. And Ambassador Haley, what do you say to Americans who are simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about?
I think, you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors. No person should ever feel in danger like this. And this is what I would say about our college presidents, is if the KKK were doing this, every college president would be up in arms. This is no different. You should treat it exactly the same. Anti-Semitism is just as awful as racism, and we've got to make sure they're protected. And for everybody that's protesting on these college campuses in favor of Hamas, let me remind you something. Hamas said death to Israel and death to America. They hate and would kill you too. And the idea that they're talking about genocide for the Jewish people, that's not the values of America. That's not us. We're better than that. We don't need to celebrate terrorists. We don't need to celebrate genocide. We don't need to celebrate violence towards anybody. We need to go back and soul search in our country and remember what we are about. And we are about taking care of people, not going and making them live in fear because some other terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
Lester, thank you. This is another question for the entire field, so you will all get a chance to respond. But Senator Scott, I'd like to start with you. The United States has given Ukraine financial and military support since the war began more than 600 days ago. President Zelensky told me on Sunday if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States. And Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more funding for Ukraine?
I certainly have been very supportive of Ukraine. I believe that ultimately we should make sure that the President of the United States states what is America's national vital interest in Ukraine. It is actually in degrading the Russian military. We've been very effective using our resources and our weaponry and the incredibly high price of Ukrainian blood to achieve that objective. Every day we get closer to the degradation of the Russian military, and that's good news. But the American people are frustrated that they do not have a president who reminds us and tells us, where's the accountability? Where are those dollars? How are those dollars being spent? We need those answers for us to continue to see the support for Ukraine. And at the same time, I would say that a package that's been offered by the president for Ukraine and Israel, that's the wrong approach. We need to focus specifically on providing Israel with the $14 billion that they need so that we show the world that we are 100% undeniably standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And then as we turn away from that direct support for Israel, we should go to our southern border and close our southern border with the resources necessary. I believe that we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. If we are going to deal with the national security emergency at our border, we have to do it now.
Senator Scott, thank you. But just to be very clear, if you were president, if you were in the Oval Office today, would you sign off on more military funding for Ukraine, or would you discontinue it?
Bottom line is we have to first have the level of accountability that allows the American people to understand where the resources have gone, number one. Number two, after we have that responsibility taken care of and accountability, then we have an opportunity to look at the overall strategy that helps us degrade the Russian military while we use our resources and, frankly, keeping our NATO partners safe from the Russian military is absolutely essential. As you understand, Article 5 would require to support and to defend NATO, our troops on the ground. The fastest way for us to eliminate that possibility is for us to destroy, to the extent possible, the Russian military. By doing so, we actually achieve the objective of keeping our military home. And that's good news.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia right now, in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, these are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians. That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one
Mr.
time
Ramaswamy,
condemn,
thank you. That's time.
at least to
Mr.
condemn
Ramaswamy,
their
thank
banning
you.
of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
Or else
thank
we're
you.
talking out of both sides.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. We asked the questions. Ambassador Haley,
Well, she deserves to
what is your take on more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer.
So this is what I will tell you.
We're
is,
driving Russia
first of all,
into
let's
China's
remember-
hands
Ramaswamy,
because of
you
these
had
foolish
your time
policies.
to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank
Ambassador,
you. The
please.
first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy. No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason the Taiwanese want us to support the Ukrainians. It's because they know that China's coming after them next. There is a reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins.
Ambassador.
We have to see the combination of those.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor Christie, what is your take, and how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kirsten, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice. This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world. And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said if you return nuclear missiles that were part of the old Soviet Union to Russia, and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And
I'd like to respond.
And the absolute giving in to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
I'd like to
Governor
respond.
Christie, thank you. Governor DeSantis, I'd like you to weigh in on this idea. Are you concerned that this could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now?
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine. I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats that we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have the military, and I'm going to deport the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from the Middle East, come from all these places. Now, Biden wants $105 billion. 60, most of that's Ukraine, including some of it going to pay pensions for bureaucrats and salaries. That is a totally ridiculous use of American tax dollars. He says he has money for border to try to do, and the media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for the Indo-Pacific? A pittance. That is the top threat that we face. We need to bring this war to an end. We need the Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may
Thank you,
respond
Governor.
to the Ukraine question.
In fact, we are going to go from the hot wars in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel to what many people are calling the new Cold War with China. And I remind the audience that it's important for our visitors at home to be able to hear you, and especially for the people in Beijing to hear you. Many Republicans believe that the Chinese Communist Party and General Secretary Xi is an existential threat to the United States. The flashpoint is Taiwan. For decades and decades, the American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a $350